Initialize. All right. And we are live. Welcome back with Murphy Mac to another episode of the Fitness Beginner Podcast, where we help you get started on your fitness journey. What's going on, everybody? We have another guest interview for the podcast today. So I think we have a cool interviewee today. I think y'all are going to get a lot of value from him. So we're going to bring him up to the screen now. We have Mr. Korey Rowe, and I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm going to let him introduce himself and just tell him a little bit about you.
Yeah, what's up, everyone? Excited to be here. Well done with the platform, Murphy. What brought me here, just like feeling inadequate and wanting to change that, and having, close enough proximity to people who were taking care of their health, who were putting together blueprints that had them feeling good, looking good, moving good. Not just for the summer, because sometimes that's a very like short-sighted goal, but persons who are thinking in decades. They wanted to feel good at 30 and 40 and beyond, be around for their family, have enough energy for their jobs, and to really just like be a strong contributor to whatever environment they're a part of, because our health is like the bedrock of that. So it started for me at 17 years old. Always felt like I was a guy who was always picked last or not at all for his sports team. Not the best feeling. Never felt quite at home in my body. So you could say that was a chip on my shoulder for wanting to be better. My brother, on the other hand, who is 7 years older than me, seemed to always get picked first, and he was a captain. And so that was my first experience with proximity. And, I saw that he was working out, going to the gym. So I'm a fitness professional with over a decade of experience in the industry, helping hundreds of people around the world, online, in person. I've led teams of trainers and wellness professionals for over 7 years in my career. So that's like the fast forward. What I was sharing earlier is like the backstory that kind of led me to that place. And I started working out at 17. And for the first time at that point, having felt so inadequate in my body, barely could do 8 push-ups on my knees. I felt like if I did the plan, if I saw a direct correlation between the inputs I put in and the output, I started to get stronger because I committed the time. I started to feel more confident in my body because I was consistent with my nutrition, my sleep, and my routine. And that's all I needed to know, that I could extrapolate, and I could move far away from the person who felt at, very inadequate and insecure, to someone who could use that win as a principle, a meta principle for just hard work and investment in the things that are great, and having the ROI, whether that be a job, health, fitness, relationships, a company, etc. So all of that led me down this obsessive path with movement, with nutrition, with best practices, focusing on the main pillars, which is that movement, sleep, and nutrition, and then dabbling in on the outskirts with some of the niche like biohacking principles that allows to just optimize for peak performance.
To think that you got picked last is an absolute insane statement to say. I
So
mean, I
repeat.
got your Instagram pulled up here, and you look like an absolute athlete. I don't know why anybody ever picked you last, but they're
Wasn't always
tripping.
that way. Wasn't always the case.
But yeah, I like you. Kind of got started the same way I did. You kind of got started at a young age. I started lifting at about 14, so high school age.
Amazing.
Very small guy, skinny. I
Mhm.
was athletic. I'll give you that. I was athletic. I didn't get picked last, but I was a little skinny dude. So it's like you said. As soon as I got in the gym, I started seeing some progress. Started seeing some results. You put in the effort and you get the reward for it. And I got hooked
So
immediately.
cool.
I got hooked, and then I've done it ever since. I just never stopped. I've been doing it ever since, and
Wait,
I love it. And I don't see myself ever quitting. I really don't.
it's harder for you. You would have to make a concerted effort. It would need to be a strategic plan for you to stop at this point. 14.
Hmm.
Is it? It's like more years than you've been alive, I assume, right? You're
Well,
looking.
I'm 26, so
So right there,
yeah,
right, right there, like midway.
yeah. I've been doing it about 12 years now, and I
Yeah.
don't ever see myself stopping.
No, definitely not. And that's one of the most amazing feeling and accomplishment. When it becomes your identity in a healthy way, where it is no harder for you to stop a practice that's so great for how you show up in the world than it is, for you to continue. And for those persons who find it very hard to move from 0 to 1, which is just like getting to that place where they're starting, it may feel like that point will never come, right?
Hmm.
You and I are proof, and so many people. And then it feels like you have the wind behind your back at that point. So if you're not, anyone listening to us feel like, oh, good for you guys, I'm not there. Remember, we didn't start out there, and we were just like consistent, and we took it a day at a time, and it became something that is ingrained in our DNA and how we go through the world.
Yeah, I like how you said it would be harder for me to stop doing it
Oh,
than
for
to
sure.
than to continue doing it. I absolutely agree with that. Like if I miss a day, I feel off. Like I feel bad, and I'll make it up. I'm hard on myself. I'll make it up the next day. I'm like, I didn't work out yesterday. I'm gonna get it in today. So
Yeah,
I agree with you 100% on that. It would be much harder for me to stop than
absolutely.
to keep going. I like that.
Be from a mile away.
So you say you're a hybrid athlete. What all do you do as a hybrid athlete?
It's a buzzword, and if you
Hmm.
ask like five guys or girls or anyone what their definition is, they'll tell you something that's a skew
Hmm.
different, right? I would say I'm more tribrid. I think hybrid is just like a easier way for people to understand that
Hmm.
you mix different modalities. But my main focus is, being great at cardiovascular output, being really good, relatively pound for pound strength, looking at like just the general metrics in terms of how much more output I can lift relative to my body weight, and the mobility aspect of it all. So those don't always coexist together. Where you find someone who is great at a cardiovascular endurance or output or performance, and who's equally as strong, and who also prioritize full range of motion and would be a bit above the average in terms of their mobility prowess. So, and the reason for that is not just to have a badge so I can brag saying I'm doing all these things. Is something that I fundamentally believe is the triage for longevity. I think you put them all together in the right ratio where you have competence and a level of comfortability, and in all three, you move and feel and look your best over a sustained period of time. And I think that's what we all want. We all want to feel good for as long as possible.
Yeah, I ask you that because I also consider myself a hybrid athlete as well. I
Mhm.
haven't always been this way. Just recently got into the endurance side of things. I played sports growing up all the way through college, and I got into weightlifting. So I mainly have done weightlifting, but here recently I've been dabbling into some endurance sports. So I did an Ironman.
That's
I
incredible.
did a bodybuilding show, and
That's
and
you're
I
the
did
tip.
a in April this year I did a 100-mile ultra marathon.
Oh,
So
you're the
I'm
real deal.
yeah, I got a bucket list now, so I'm just marking them off now. So
That's
I
incredible.
now identify as a hybrid athlete. I'm one of those. I hopped on the trend because I know it's very trendy nowadays to say you're a hybrid athlete. So I was just curious what all you did, um, and what you considered hybrid. 'Cause honestly, I think that's a good way to go about it. Is to be better in more areas. Like you said, the mobility. I think that's great. That's one I lack in for sure. I
Mhm.
need to work on that some more. But yeah, I think it's it's great to be more well rounded, cardiovascular wise, and strength and muscular wise.
Well done on all your accomplishment. It's no easy feat for anyone listening. What you've done, and for you to have done it in like such a condensed period, coming from a predominant strength background.
Hmm.
So that's super inspiring.
Yeah, I always tell myself this. I had sports growing up to kind of keep me busy, and I did weightlifting on the side. Well,
Mhm.
then once I graduated college, I was like, well,
Mhm.
damn, I got all this extra time. I don't know what to do with myself. That's when I started dabbling in the endurance sports. I, started with the triathlon and stuff, and so now I've made it a thing to where I'm gonna do one big like bucket list item every year. So that's
That's
my goal. Do
that's
one every year. I want to do a high rocks now. That's on my list
hey,
to do
you have the
is a high
fitness.
rock. Yeah, so that's what I'm probably gonna do next year. That's probably the goal
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to do. But yeah, I consider myself a runner now. I love running, and it's funny because I didn't like running when I did my triathlon, but when I just recently did this 100-mile ultra marathon,
Mm.
I got the bug for running, so I enjoyed it a lot too. I'm gonna keep that in my
Yeah.
regular routine. So yeah, I've always never been a runner. Like I always did sprints growing up because I played sports, but never long distance. Like when I started training for my triathlon, the furthest I ever ran was probably 3 miles. So
Wow.
it was a
But
big it
through
was a
the
big
100.
awakening. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a well, no, I did not to the 100. When I was doing my triathlon, it
Yeah.
was 3 miles. So when I did my 100, the furthest I ever ran was a marathon. So 26.2.
Wow.
So still a big difference though.
Huge. Yeah. It's almost the same at that point.
Yeah.
With that sort of load. Well, that goes to show, we can. believe one thing, but most of our beliefs is lack of practice, and the failure to build a skill. Things that we hold as concrete truths are really just an idea that we haven't really put a plan behind, right? To kind of
Hmm.
disprove, because you would have thought you're a runner, and here we are, right? Full on 100 miles.
Yeah, and that I think that's what brings me back to keep doing these challenges is because in our minds we have these limits, like we have boundaries, and we set them ourselves. Like nobody else tells us. Well, they probably do, but like nobody's telling us you can't do that. We're telling ourselves that. You're like, oh, you can't run 100 miles. But then when you make a plan and you do it, it's such a like fulfilling feeling that you get once you cross the finish line. You're
Absolutely.
like, heck yeah, I did that. You're so proud of yourself, and
That's it.
that's what makes me keep coming back to it and keep doing it. So it's that goes along with fitness in general as well. Like if you have a goal of losing weight, like when you lose that 20 pounds, that goal you made, man, it's so fulfilling. You get such a great feeling from it, and I think that's what gets people addicted, gets people hooked to it.
Hmm.
But that comes with you can get obsessive with it, and it can get unhealthy. I agree. Like running
Absolutely.
running 100 miles is probably not very smart for most people. Doing a bodybuilding show definitely is not smart. That's not healthy at all. But you know what you're getting yourself into when you sign up for something like that.
Absolutely.
So you just got to be smart about it.
Absolutely. And there's great and not so great ways to navigate that line. I think any great accomplishment comes with the risk factor of
Hmm.
the pursuit and the obsession required to do it at the apex level being unhealthy. And I think a world class professional who sacrifices their physical health because they push themselves to the limit will agree with that. But life comes with trade-offs, and
Hmm.
the goal is to try to minimize the downside that comes with great and lofty pursuits, and see to the end, cross that finish line, like you said, and have the reward. But there is no great or grand accomplishment without the sacrifice of sorts. We just want to
Absolutely.
make sure that it's not a fatal or too detrimental of a sacrifice, but a price needs to be paid, and I think we need to make peace with that.
Yeah. So you have when it comes to your training, you kind of are known for your flexibility. So what brought you to flexibility, mobility? What got you into that?
I think my audience is still trying to define what I do. I think there's some stuff that jumps out, and when you look at my programs or you look at my page. What brought me there was it was an injury. Getting injured, my brokenness, I would say, that led me down a path of wanting to find a solution, similar to not being the strongest or being picked last. For me, it's like a thematic thing where it's like a problem pops up. I'm like, I really don't want to have to deal with this. Let me put together a solution to kind of move from that place of discomfort. So growing up, I would pick up all these injuries, and they accumulated over time: knee, hips, ankles, back, shoulders. And when I started training initially, my enthusiasm for training wasn't didn't have the guardrails it needed for me to be smart. So I took risks that I shouldn't, and I picked up injuries here and there. And it
Hmm.
accumulated as I went into my 30s, and I needed to put together a plan to help me recover and to sort of like regain my former abilities. So it was like a hip injury that I felt like I needed hip surgery. My labrum was all busted, and I knew enough at that point because I had been working with clients. I had my certification. I had consider myself as someone who is an expert of sorts within this space. So I knew what was happening with me, and I also knew what I would prescribe for a client. So I made myself my client, and I put together the blueprint, and then I started to just uncover ways of how to rehab, and then how to prehab, and how to get back to where I was, and in many instances beyond where I was, because I was now training smarter. So what you see online, what I put in my program, the philosophy I have, is an expression of my own path that led to a blueprints, the care method that I have shared with thousands now, who need similar help. But it's more than flexibility. Flexibility without strength is just for show. And I would say strength without flexibility is a ticking bomb, injury waiting to happen. So I believe in the unity of both. So I would say I equally focus on mobility as I do strength. I think they are a perfect marriage. And everything that I put out will have an element of prioritizing both of those to some degree, along with the cardiovascular stuff that we talked about. So that's what led me to the place of leading with that being my triage approach to movement, wellness, and longevity.
So you, when it comes to like your programs, do you pretty much have some kind of mobility work with every weight training session you do, or you do it like weight training one day, mobility the next day? How do you pair it together?
Yeah, the goal, the goal is depends on where I'm starting from or the client is starting from. It looks different based on point A and also the desired endpoint, right? Because then that will sort of inform what we do and how we put it together. But from a high level bird's eye view, typically I'm looking to sort of microdose mobility housed within a strength program. I think strength is foundation, and then the mobility microdose throughout strategically. What is prioritized and to the degree depends on the limitation of the individual or the goal being pursued. So that's the thought process, the guiding philosophy. But it's a microdose, and ultimately we want to get to a place where it's almost indistinguishable between a strength or a mobility movement, because now you have complete control through full range of motion. So now a strength movement looks like your typical mobility movement. And I think at that point is when you're most productive with the time, right? Because you've now moved from this sort of microdosing approach to this like hybrid approach to your training, leading to greater hypertrophy, greater joint health, functionality, and mobility. So no, for myself, there's a strong union between both, but it started with microdosing.
Yeah, I always try to. I believe in full range of motion for sure. Like everything I do, I try to do a full range of motion. And recently I've been doing that. I listen to a lot of Mind Pump. I'm sure you're familiar with Mind Pump, and they speak a lot about full range of motion, like you said, being stronger in those mobility positions, those flexible positions. So I think that's very important. I've been working on that more, like trying to get deeper on my squats. Overhead press. I'm coming all the way down to my chest, all the way out. So I'm trying to do it more. I mean, well, I've been doing it for a long time now, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm being more like not cautious, but more proactive. Like I'm actively working on it and not just using it as a byproduct. Because I'm not old yet, but I am getting older, and I definitely have seen myself, starting to lose flexibility, getting tighter and things like that. So I'm trying
Absolutely.
to make it. I'm still not like fully bought in. I don't do it as much as I should,
Yeah.
but definitely working on it. Because I want to be able to, when I'm 65, I want to be able to, move around pretty good. I don't want to be walking with a
But
cane or anything like that.
and there's no need to, God forbid, some unfortunate injury, if you're proactive as you are right now. And, for those camp, I am very open to the different philosophies. I have my core identity, and I know there's like a time and place for partial range of motion based on injuries or limitation or targeting. So I think that we flank it, with the meta principles like we're talking about, leading with full range of motion, and then there are unique instances where we can bias a specific range, shortened or lengthened, based on what point A is and point B is. But I think the combination to what you're saying is how we get to 65, and we're like moving around, and we're not feeling like 65. Our chronological age doesn't have to dictate, how we feel and how we move, right? It can become just a mention in the room, but it doesn't have to speak to how well and how strong we are at these like these checkpoint years, I would say.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see. I'm pretty sure you've heard of the blue zones before. I think
Hmm.
that's what's called a blue zone.
Yeah, please.
Where all like the older generation, they're up working, walking up and down hills. They're flexible, and it's due to movement. I mean, you're not being sedentary all the time like we are here. I'm assuming you're in the U.S. I know we're in the U.S. We're so sedentary nowadays. Like most jobs are
Hmm.
desk jobs. I work a desk job. I'm bad about it myself, sitting down too much. I heard somebody say, and I say this a lot. I heard somebody say sitting is the new smoking. So I talk about this all the time. Like it's sitting to us is killing us, just like smoking is killing us,
Hmm.
because we're not moving. We're being too sedentary nowadays, and I think it's going to have a huge effect on our health in the long term.
Yeah, I
So
already have. Data is clear, it's evident. There's no debating that. No one says, "Hey, sit more."
Yeah.
And it's an easy split testing. You know, sit all day versus getting some movement. See how you feel at the end of the day, and that will tell you what it looks like over years of doing either or. You know, you get a blue zone scenario, or you get what we have here. Sadly, too much in the West.
So what are some common mobility mistakes that you see people making a lot, and how can they fix these?
Um, I think it is, chasing the bells and whistles of, flexibility on display, versus the nuance path to getting more mobile, right? So you'll find that, someone will see a movement practitioner with years under their belt doing a highly advanced mobility movement or flexibility movement, which is a movement expression. It's almost like an accumulation of best practices over a long time that develop the skill so they can do that. And a lot of persons feel disheartened by the fact that they can't touch their toes, um, or they can't do these movements on day one, right? And a lot of persons pursue the show and the bells and the whistle, and they end up getting hurt, because they lack the humility to say, "Let me start where I'm at." And it's understood in strength training, where you don't just go into the gym and start back squatting 350, right? You see someone doing it, and you have an understanding that I'm not there yet, and maybe I shouldn't. Mobility is just like running a 100-mile race. All these levels of fitness are just like that. I think in mobility, sometimes it's kind of like underrated, that it
Hmm.
takes a lot of time and a lot of intentionality, and it is a strength of sorts that requires that same sort of progressive overload or progressive, exposure to the fundamentals to get better at it. So that's one. It's a long-winded way, because I think that would save a lot of people injuries, and it will save them a lot of like emotional, stress, because they think that they're somehow super inefficient or insufficient, because they're not doing that. The other thing would be they think it's all about flexibility. They think about, being contorting themselves into hyperextended or hypermobile positions. That's not what it's about, and you do not have to have the ultimate range of motion for you to be functional and strong and to be set up for longevity. There are some biomechanical limitations, and then there's some functional requirements based on your lifestyle and what you're doing that you may not need to be, like be doing a circus act. So to your point, someone running 100 miles and doing strength training, maybe what they don't need the sort of mobility and flexibility as someone who is a yoga practitioner or someone who is a specific mobility or movement specialist, based on what they're going for, because it could become a limiting factor and a potential risk for them to be as mobile. They probably need a little bit more tension, a little bit more stability in their joints and just right across their chain, more so than this excessive mobility, which can lead to damage over time. So it really comes down to the athlete and the individual and their lifestyle, right? So the degree that you need to be strong, the degree that you need to be mobile is predicated on how you're moving through the world, right? So more, I would bolt that to say more isn't always better.
Hmm.
More mobility isn't always, but there's a threshold that is maximum return for you. So I would say some person just understanding that is something that is also misunderstood. And persons who are mobile like myself, don't always do a good job at making that clear, because they're always celebrating how they're mobile, and they're
Yeah,
never really flanking it with the reality that not everyone needs to be mobile like you, bro.
that's an interesting point there. That you for mobility, there's not like a it's very specific depending on the person. There's not, you would think when it comes to mobility, you would think everybody should just meet certain parameters. Like everybody should be able to touch their toes. Everybody should be able to, scratch their own back or whatever. But I like the way you think about it. That depends on specifically for what that person is doing, what their goal is, kind of on their lifestyle. That's a different way to look at it. I never looked at it
Yeah.
at that way, but that's a good point there. I like that.
And I would say, the feedback on that for someone who's looking for an objective way to determine if they need to be more mobile, pain.
Hmm.
If you're experiencing pain in certain range of motion, right? And if that pain or restriction or limitation, and that limitation is preventing you from having optimal muscle development, and it's now leading to joint instability. You don't not feeling stable, you're feeling tight, you're feeling compromised, you're feeling at ease and excessively tense in your body right off the bat. If you also notice, like you perfectly said earlier, as time goes by and you're relatively young or you're in middle age stages and you're beginning to lose what you once had, meaning that you're moving away from your baseline. So, by your standards, your baseline of mobility and flexibility and lack of tightness is being compromised. Then you also need it. So, not compared to someone else, by your own baseline. So, checking your baseline, checking how you're feeling, looking at how it's affecting your performance and your quality of life. So, I believe most people, could do with increasing and improving and protecting their mobility. Know the degree is know what is determined by your ultimate goal. But we should all be looking to preserve and to expand what we have, because as life goes on, we tend to atrophy. We tend to to break down. So we have to be proactive with protecting what we have.
Yeah, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. I
For,
love that saying.
for
And
sure.
it works for everything, like
Yeah.
not just fitness, pretty much everything you do. If you
Yeah.
don't use it, you'll lose it. I like to say that a lot as well. You mentioned pain at the beginning. So specifically for me, I have a question about pain. You probably get this question a lot.
Mhm.
What can I do for lower back pain? I know it's hard to answer that question without you being like seeing me and my movement
Mhm.
patterns and stuff, but I've pretty much always had like a little nagging back pain, which like most people do.
Mhm.
I've come to the conclusion that I have tight hip flexors. I think that has a lot to do with it. I've seen where you can strengthen your glutes to try to help with that, and I don't think that's an issue for me. I think my glutes are pretty strong,
Mhm.
so I believe I just have super tight hip flexors.
Or weak
And
flexors.
say what?
Or weak.
Yeah, yeah, that's what. Yeah, that
Yeah.
could be it too. Well,
Yeah.
what's the way you can strengthen your hip flexors?
So without, it's almost like, and this is not a cop out. This is just like a professional being responsible with the way he gives information. Right. It's hard to give like medical advice because every person or professional advice on it, because every person will experience tightness, while
Hmm.
they describe it the same, the makeup of the components that contribute to it could be very different. For you,
Hmm.
like you said, it could be glutes being issue. Someone could have underactive or glute amnesia. They sit too much, their glutes forget to work. Or someone could have overactive, hip flexors. Maybe they're doing a lot of like hip flexion work, and that has created like excessive strength, and that leads to an imbalance where it pulls on their back. There are persons that could be just like weak across the board and are doing movements that they don't have the strength for, like running excessive periods, and they're overusing the strength that they have. So that's like three scenarios, and their combinations and variables of all that. So a broad statement is, first, do no harm. So if you're doing something and it's causing your lower back to hurt, you want to
Hmm.
stop that. So you want to start with the process of elimination. A lot of times there are persons who are so committed, or they ignore the red flags, that they continue to do the things that are creating pain, not realizing that pain is a signal for you to stop, assess, and then address. Stop, assess, address. Most people just power through, right? No pain, no gain. Like that's not what we want to do. So a lot of injuries could have been easily corrected or prevented, to the scale that they go if persons stopped at the right time. So that's the first thing that you can do. The other thing you want to think about is strategic ways to manage inflammation. Most times, if there's pain or tightness or strain, there's going to be inflammation, and you want to do that through sleep. You want to do that through the rest. You want to do that through probably topical application, thinking about ice or contrast therapy, and you also want to do that by just having an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, like eating well, staying hydrated. Highly underrated,
Hmm.
right? So those are things that globally apply. And then the assessment standpoint of it, we want to like get to the root of what exactly is your issue, right? And that's where you probably need like a movement professional
Hmm.
to kind of like help you figure out what exactly is the issue, so we can then come up with what the prescription is, which is what you were asking me about. And for me to do that without the assessment and the determination, then that is like malpractice, right? And then you do that, and then the goal now over time is you want to respect the process of getting stronger. So a lot of times there's a trade-off with our training, all right, where we have to now shift into this sort of rebuild phase, where we're really prioritizing taking two steps back in rehab, or in strengthening, or in prioritizing the weak links in our chain, to then get back to the place where we can get back to running 100 miles, we can get back to being on the field, we can get back to really pushing ahead. So I would say, know that the work sometimes look like recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And for persons who are moving all the time, they have a hard time respecting that sometimes the hardest work you will do, it is to recover, is to reset, is to have a rehab and then a prehab program. So you'll see athletes a lot of times, they'll do incredible feats that everyone will applaud for. And where they're really missing it is that they're not doing the hard work of recovering as hard as they perform. So that's my mindset about thinking about like getting to that place where any injury across the board, you can be up and running and feeling your best again.
Yeah, I think that was a great. I think you broke it down great there. I know a lot of people have back pain and issues like that, so I just wanted to ask you that. Well,
I would say
I think
I would say it's not normal, because you said most people, and I would say if you're most people, don't be comforted by that.
yeah,
It is not normal. We're not meant to be in pain. I think the ultimate form of fitness is to be walking around as a brain thinking experience in the world, not being hypersensitive about what's going on in your gut, what's going on in your joint, what's going on in your back, what's going on in your muscles. A body that is healthy doesn't alert you to its presence. Is when a body that's broken, that screams at you through pain, through fatigue, through indigestion. So your goal is to get to the place where you're not taking it for granted, but you're not excessively hyperfixating on your body and thinking about it. And that's a good mark of a healthy body.
yeah, I like that how you broke it down. You made it more digestible. But yeah, pain is there for a reason. Like your body, you don't just have pain for no reason. Like there's a reason, there's a root cause for pain in your body, and you need to
And
figure
it's
it
not
out.
normal.
Say what now?
And it's not normal.
Yeah, yeah, it's not normal, but we try to make it normal nowadays. People try
It's
to make it
risky.
normal, even though it's not normal.
It's risky. It's risky.
But yeah, um, I just forgot what I was going to ask. Sorry.
All good. That we said a lot to chew on. With that, I would say, practical stuff for back pain. I would say it's unfortunate. Most people, if everyone's listening here, if you already have an injury, yes, we talked about rehab, the care method, and we have a lot of stuff that we do. I have a program on Center that's like more of a performance mobility program that you can check out. It's called Strength in Motion. I also have the care method that persons can log on to and see what's happening there. I'm on Instagram, Korey Rowe, Korey.row, Korui.row. You can see what's going on there. So for persons who want like, to go scope what's happening there, what I would say is if you have an injury, right? Yes, we need a plan. But the best thing to do is to not get one. And
Mhm.
that's simple, right? And the way we do that is by having a sound training plan, by listening to your body, finding the help that you need, not to walk around being all gingery and being afraid that you get hurt at every turn, because we're way more resilient than that. But the best way is to get ahead of it. A lot of the mobility work and the prehab work and the joint care, you want to do those before you have the problem, so that you do not have the problem, right? We want to get ahead of the problem, and that's the highest form of care. Rehab should be something that seldomly happens. It shouldn't be the norm where every other week you're finding yourself needing rehab, because once you get injured, you have compromise that you can get over, but it's a lot harder than if you were just smart to begin with.
Absolutely. So what are some things you would, in general, say that people should do like on a daily basis to get ahead of these injuries? I know it's very going to be very specific, but like if you just had to name a few like
Mhm.
generic things that you do, maybe something you do daily, like maybe stretching,
Yep.
obviously, or I'm assuming one of those things is weightlifting. Do you have any ones that you like in particular?
Absolutely. And obviously, these are big buckets, guys. So I would advise us to kind of like dig into it a little bit more and get more specific.
Hmm.
Say, sitting, like you said, is a new cigarette. Sit less.
Hmm.
Highly underrated. There's so much that happens when you start to sit. You're inactive. You're not expending energy. You're probably, in this kind of calcified position of sitting. You're rounded. Your neck starts to protrude. Your shoulders start to round forward. Your hip flexors start to get tight. Your glute becomes underactive. Your circulation gets weak. All of this, starts to break down the integrity of your movement pattern and your overall health, like off the bat. So that's huge. So make it a practice, to at least get your 10,000 steps in. More than that, if you can, intermittently get up and move and walk. It would be good too if you have like a stretch routine that you can do while you're standing as well in between. Feels like a lot, but it's worth it. It's harder when you don't. And then on top of that, I would say spending time on the floor. Highly underrated. If sitting, as bad as sitting is for you, I would say the equivalent is spending time on the floor in squatted positions, in sort of like tummy time, hyperextension positions, in terms of like being close to the floor, that sort of movement, thinking about like a kid, like rolling around on the floor, moving around on the floor, doing work on the floor, or a farmer, aggressively in a squat position. All these blue zones have a healthy relationship with the floor, whether
Hmm.
it's if they go to the bathroom on the floor, or they're farmers on in the ground tilling, or they're like walking, they're reaching, they're picking. Having a healthy relationship with the floor is super important. It complements walking and moving around perfectly well, because you have competence at both extremes, and in between is where the problem happens, which is the sitting, which we're trying to avoid. So spending more time on the floor is great. I love to be in like a passive squat and do movement. A good visualization of this. The next time you see a toddler, watch how they operate. A toddler is going to sit on the floor a lot with their toys, moving around, having their knees and their hips in these odd positions, and they'll be reaching over, and they'll spend like 30 minutes, an hour, sometimes hours. They're doing that. That is a very primal. It's not just their competence in terms of walking or running. It's a very primal pattern that we have, that if you think about it now, when is the last time we spent excessive time on the floor unless we're nursing an injury or we fell or something like that? We don't.
Hmm.
That I think is like super healthy. You'll find that it's very uncomfortable to be there and to do things, especially with your heels on the floor. If you do that, that radically will change your health. So we talk about walking, spending more time on the floor in these like active positions, strength training, for sure, and prioritizing full range of motion. And the other would be, the, I would say that's it. If you want to get some cardio in as well, super supported. But those are underrated, very underrated. The sitting on the floor, moving around on the floor is going to develop very primal patterns in odd planes. The strength training is going to develop bone density, tendon health, muscle through full range of motion. And the walking is going to be somewhat your meta activity, because we were meant to have walking as our meta activity, as an overarching way of like getting from place to place. So you'll be tapping into something that's very fundamental. And if you do that consistently, over time, you'll definitely reap the benefits of it all.
Yeah, I really like your answer about the floor. I think that's a great answer. Because if
Mhm.
you think about it, you normal like everyday people, they never get on the floor ever. Like you
Ever
never.
the floor. Years ago by.
Yeah, and it's like we said earlier. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. So if you're not getting in that squatted position, or if you're not sitting like Indian style,
Yeah.
like you'll lose that. And I've noticed that as well too. I'm pretty good about when I work out. I do a lot of things on the floor, so I do get on the floor some.
You
But
know
yeah,
the
that's a good point though that you like. I really like that. I've seen there was a study done, and I can't remember exactly how it went, but they were saying like so many percent of people by the time you hit a certain age, they can't stand up from the floor, or it was like either
absolute.
they can't stand up without their hands or something like that. It was something that effect, but it was exactly to your point. Like your point
So,
made perfect sense. Like when
so
we get older, you won't be able to get up off the floor by yourself.
I remember this client. She came to me. It was a grandma. I think she was in her 60s at the time. And I was a young trainer, like in my career. And I thought everyone wanted to just get stronger, put on muscle, get leaner. So I am onboarding her and I'm painting the picture of what she will be like in the next 6 months, because I'm like, I can do this. I can help you with this. I know everyone wants this. Everyone's excited. Everyone always wants to get strong. And she stopped me. She said, "Oh, that is great. But I just want to be able to get off the floor when I'm playing with my grandkids."
Mm-hmm.
And I
So
was
it's the little things in life.
like,
Yeah, you don't realize it now because you're still younger, but as you get that older, I mean, think of your grandparents. If I know if my grandmother fell on the floor, there's no way she's getting herself up. There's no way. So I think that's I like that point that you bring up about doing more things on the floor. Like even like if you're going to watch TV, like instead of sitting on the couch, sit on the floor and watch TV. If you're going to sit anyways,
and
you might as well do
you'll
it.
notice the difference in your spine. You'll notice the difference,
Mm-hmm.
reaching around. I have a whole floor series of movements that I do. I'll go into the gym and there will be some sort of ground low movement contact. Now, the criticism for something like that is it the most optimal for building muscle because you don't have the right leverage? No, it's not. But that's not what it's for. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not what it's for. It's not what I'm doing when I'm going there. It's almost like someone said, "Is running optimal for building muscle?" And you're like, no, when I run, that's not what I'm trying to do. I said, no, it's not. I'm trying to do something else. So being on the floor, it is true. As I so what I've done, I've documented my son. I have a 2 year old son, and I documented his movement journey. I took videos, mapped his movement patterns, and I play with him on the floor and I try to mimic what he does. It's so hard to do what he does. It's like, and I am mobile and it's a hard time keeping up. And I go to the gym and I map these patterns and they look odd, but they feel hard, and I feel the benefit of how limber I am. Having like mapped a lot of these forgotten patterns that I probably haven't done since his age, right? And I complement that with the cardio and I complement that with the strength training to make sure I'm hitting all the other goals. But in the middle, really does a great work of keeping you just like preserving your movement quality.
Yeah, I really like that point. I'm gonna have to be more like proactive about doing things on the floor, especially now that you brought it up. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like it makes so much sense. And even some like cultures do this. Like some cultures still eat on the floor. Like they say, I think it may be is it Japanese people? Some some Asian cultures they'll literally sit on the floor to eat. Like they don't sit at a table like we do. And
Yes.
I think it's for a good reason. Like they've been doing
Oh,
it for
so much better.
thousands of years.
So
So
much,
why change it now?
so much better. We're the only animals that find a seat and sit.
Hmm. It kind of reminds me, sitting on the floor reminds me of another topic that I've been pretty interested in lately that you don't ever realize that you don't do until you think about it. Like I didn't realize I wasn't sitting on the floor until you just brought it up. But another thing is grounding. So I don't know if you what you know about grounding, but
Mhm.
it's just like connecting with the earth. So I just read a book on this, so it's new on my head.
Right.
If you think about it, you never come in contact with the earth
No.
ever. You're always wearing shoes,
And that's very unnatural.
or if you're not wearing shoes, you're inside. So you never make contact with the earth ever, unless you're the only way you do it is you have to proactively go outside barefooted and walk in the grass. Walk in the dirt, the sand. Maybe when you go like to the beach,
I
you
did that
are.
today, so I'm big on it. Grounding is huge.
Yeah, I didn't know much about it until I just read a book about it recently, so I'm very like into it now. So I'm very aware of it, and I try it now. I'm trying to go outside without my shoes on, and I realized it didn't. It took me reading this book to realize that like I never touch the surface of the ground ever. Like you're either on concrete, you're in your house on tile floor or on a carpet, and when you go outside, you got shoes on. So it just makes you more aware when you think of things like that. So when you talked about sitting on the floor, it made me think of that same topic.
Your feet has just as much nerve endings as your hands,
Mm-hmm.
right? We are touching things or we feel how soft they are, and our feet just never get that sort of exposure, and it's healthy. There's over 200,000 nerve endings and all 100 ligaments and tendons and muscles in your feet, and and it is the foundation of your movement chain,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the grounding is important, but how our feet are developed when they're out of these padded shoes and when they're making contact with the ground and feeling these uneven surface, that has a direct correlation to the integrity and the health of everything above the foot. The ankles, the knees, the hips, and how it kind of like all ripples through. And all you have to do is think about the accumulative effect of the lack of that sort of engagement and connectivity over hundreds of thousands of steps in your lifetime. Anything over that higher level of frequency that is suboptimal is going to have an accumulative negative effect, no matter how marginal that negative effect is at the first onset, right? Just because of the compounding nature of it. So we do lose a lot when we're not making connection with the ground.
Yeah, it's also good. I read about like a lot about this too. It's also good to not just from a grounding standpoint, but it's good to walk barefoot to help build the muscles in your feet. We're not when you wear shoes, you don't realize it, but the shoes are compensating
Mhm.
for where you lack mobility and things in your feet. So it's good to. I bought some of the barefoot shoes. Like
Yeah,
I went all in. Like you talked about biohacking a little bit earlier. I'm all in on the biohacking now. Like I'm all in. Like I did. I got the ice bath going. I'm walking barefooted. I'm walking outside in the grass. So I'm fully invested now. I'm definitely I'm one of those. I'm definitely on the trend, unfortunately, but
and
I like it. I like doing it.
it's worth it because you're doing the 20%
Hmm.
optimized based on breaking new science, and you're honoring the basics of nutrition, sleep, and strength training. And in the combination of taking the new data as it comes out and running with it, and then undergirding that with the tried and true, sleeping, training, and eating well, you're in a good place. Great formula.
So you have let's see. You coined this term microdosing wellness. You talked about it a little bit earlier, microdosing. So where did you come up with this kind of philosophy? Just
Um, I think I think it's the pursuit for the fastest path to the ultimate goal of feeling your best or being well. In terms of like how strong we are, how optimized our blood and our hormonal levels are, and I realized that the common approach is the crash course, where we want to think about spending more time in the gym or excessively working out or going on this strict restrictive or diet or having all these excessive biohacking principles or practices integrated into our lifestyle. And I found that that was actually the slow way to go about it, right? Because it may be high effort, but most times it's hard for people to sustain that level of intensity over the time period that they need to
hmm.
get the results that they're after. And that's why you see that, their person's consistency is one of the biggest challenge within health and wellness and fitness, right? And most of the time it's because the intensity isn't something that people can sustain, right? And because of that, they end up, quitting or being discouraged or being burnt out. So I think having and microdosing doesn't necessarily mean low effort or no intensity. It means consistent effort at an intensity that you can sustain over decades to come. Even if the complexion of that changes slightly, right? It is still following the principle of an intensity dose that you can repeat day in, day out without having the sort of fatigue that will cause you to be discouraged or burnout. So it's all the simple practices, right? It is following like a predominant wellness blueprint, right? And that you can sustain. So microdosing is just like looking for every opportunity you can really to, do that better practice and without it becoming an obsessive thought. So if I have the opportunity to get up and go for a walk, I'm going to get up and go for a walk. If I have the opportunity to take the stairs, I'm going to take the stairs. If I have the opportunity to do a 20-minute workout, even if it's not a 2 hour workout, an hour workout, I'm going to take that 20-minute workout. I'm not going to disregard it or disqualify it as not being important. So it is looking for all the inroads that you can, to add a wellness practice in your life, right? And then when you do have the luxury or the opportunity or the capacity to do these monumental feats and these impressive feats that everyone clap for, you take those as well. But that's not the foundation of your wellness, right? Your wellness is microdosed through daily acts of discipline and seizing the opportunities to do something that puts you in a better emotional state, physical state, or mental state.
Yeah, so something is better than nothing.
Something
That's kind
better.
of what I'm hearing. Something's
Yeah,
better than nothing.
exactly.
Yeah, I like that. People underestimate what you can do in 10 minutes or what you can do in 20 minutes.
Absolutely.
Um,
And
say
that's
you only have ten
time.
minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have 10 minutes. I mean, knock out some push ups and air squats real quick, and then later on in the day, you got another 10 minutes. Do something else. Do some
yeah,
mobility work, some flexibility. It goes a long ways, and it comes back to sustainability. And I talk about sustainability a lot on the podcast. Um, because you see so many people, they just in and out of fitness, like they
yes,
come in, they get motivated, they're going strong, they're going to the gym, they start seeing some initial results, and then it starts to get hard.
yes,
They miss a day, then
yes.
that day turns into a week, and it's like you
Very
got to create something that's sustainable, something that works for you, and what works for you probably is not going to work for me, or it's not going to work for the next person. You got to figure out what works with you, and you got to give it time. People are too impatient nowadays. They try to rush things, they try to rush their results. um, and
and
yeah.
opportunities that we do have because we're waiting for the perfect opportunity to have. So you'll notice most times if someone doesn't go to the gym, when they say they don't have time, what they really mean is that they don't have an hour.
It's not a priority.
Yeah, and even if it means that it's not a priority, and their definition of time is so fixed into an ideal that if it's not that, it's nothing, and they don't embrace this something is better than nothing principle. So you don't have an hour, but you have 10 minutes. You have the time to do something. And what happens over time when you seize these opportunities that are low hanging fruit that are easy to access, you start to develop the identity that you know have because you start to have more skin in the game and you're tethered to the idea because you're thinking about it, even if it is just a 10 minutes of the day. You're making that one healthy meal choice for the day because that's what you have the capacity or you have the discipline for. You're taking what you can. And when you take what you can to the level that you are able to be committed, you're microdosing it. Over time, that stacks. Your identity
Hmm.
shifts and your desire to do it and your priority ranking for these activities start to go up. And before you know it, no, you have a whole system going on. But we have to have the humility to know that if we want to start a new practice, sometimes we're just where we are, and we may not be running 100 miles at day one or being in the gym 6 days a week and making sure that we're eating all whole foods. But can you eat a meal that's healthy? Like, and start there and don't feel bad about yourself because that's where you start because that's just who you are at the moment and that's the capacity you have. Start there, and then in a week's time, 2 weeks, the next day you'll be able to do two, and you string those along, and that's how you build a brick wall around your wellness, with good habits.
Absolutely. You can't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 10.
No,
I like to look at it that way. It's like, yeah, this person over here may be on chapter 10, but
mm,
guess what? They started on chapter 1 just like you
just
where you need to be. They started in the same spot.
where
They
you
just been doing it day in and day out, and now they're ahead of you. But you can't think, "Oh, I'm trying to be like this person." You got to start where, like you said, start where you're at, where you are, and then build on it from there. That consistency builds momentum. Momentum can take you a long ways. That's important.
yeah, momentum is the 8-1 of the world.
So, all right, when we hit you with, I want to respect your time here, so we'll ask you some quick ones. If you had to commit to doing just one daily thing to improve your fitness, or even your mindset around fitness, what would you recommend?
Gratitude.
Okay,
Gratitude for the only place that I can't escape,
I like that.
and that's your body.
Awesome. Um, so yeah, is there anything you wanted to bring up on your end? Do you have any questions or if
Well, it would be definitely pointing people to where they can find more of what I do. I believe that what
mhm.
I do is just a well-needed solution, and it's tried and proven with the sort of results that we have, and the quick places for people to find that. I have my strength in motion program out on the Center app, and on my page, Korey.Rowe. I have my care method. We do one-on-one coaching. We have on-demand programs, and those are the primary places that I'm at. And I would say, hey, listen, it you can't escape being in your body. So it's high time that we all continue to prioritize it and take care of it. And it directly impacts everything that you do and everyone around you. And the greatest gift you can give to yourself and the people around you is to make sure that you're prioritizing your health and your well-being because it bleeds on everything in your life.
Yeah, I always like to say, taking care of yourself. It's not selfish. It's actually selfless. Because
Mm,
if you take care of yourself, then you can pour into other people more. You can't pour from an empty cup. So
yeah,
you got to show up for yourself first before you can take care of others. I
absolutely.
think that goes a long way. Some people get it mixed up. They're like, they think you're being selfish by looking after yourself, but
Mm,
that's not how it works.
definitely not.
But yeah, I think that's all I got for you. So I appreciate you coming on to the podcast. And thank you, Matt, again for setting everything up. Y'all go check him out at Korey.Rowe. I'm looking at your Instagram. You have a massive following, by the way, 1 million followers. That's crazy. But yeah, thank you so much for doing what you do, helping people out. That's what we're here to do. That's why I do the podcast. The goal is to help one person with every podcast episode. If I can help one person, then that's a win for me. We're just trying to help people, get started on their fitness journey, learn a little bit more about, you know, some things to do within their fitness journey to help keep them motivated and things like that. So that's the goal, that's the mission, and we're going to help people get healthier one day at a time.
Let's go continue the great work. It's impactful.
Thank you. All right. Thank y'all so much for tuning in to the Fitness Beginner Podcast. We will see y'all again next week.
All right, take care.